Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here in the live studios in Hythe, Kent, Southeast England, just near the English Channel. And in Anglo-Saxon, Hythe translates to haven. So we're creating a haven here. Yes, our sources of authority are Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So, but the basis of the other two is Shastra. So whatever we do, we should also consult and follow in the footsteps of the instructions in Shastra. That is the way to organize and solve the problems of the world individually and collectively. So therefore, we've decided to read Srila Prabhupada's books straight for at least 45 minutes a day, every day, before we have reflections. And so far, so good. All the devotees like it too much. So welcome aboard, and anybody who's new, please tell your friends, and keep liking the page, and let's spread Krishna consciousness like this. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatana Goswami from the Sri Krishna Lila Stava. He explains the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in 5 verses, and it's the reason we put emphasis on Shastra, as you'll hear. It goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdipiyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Purāṇa Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho Kali Dvandoditaditya Sri Kṛṣṇa Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Kṛṣṇa. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Saduta Dayin Atini Chochata Kada Hanamun Chagadachin Mam Premna Rit Kantayuk Spura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, we reached the 9th chapter of the first canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and the ongoing prelude to the actual delivery of the Bhagavatam by Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. And now it's the very end of the Battle of Kurukshetra, and Bhīṣmadeva is still lying on the bed of arrows, waiting for Kṛṣṇa to come to him. And Kṛṣṇa is bringing Maharaj Yudhishthira to Bhīṣma for instruction so that he will agree to sit on the throne. We're beginning with text 26. Bhīṣma has just spoken very affectionately about the Pandavas and heartily invited Maharaj Yudhishthira to take up the post that he owned and earned and deserved, which was his actual heir to. Text 26. At Maharaj Yudhishthira's inquiry, Bhīṣmadeva first defined all the classifications of castes and orders of life in terms of the individual's qualifications. Then he systematically, in twofold divisions, described counteraction by detachment and interaction by attachment. Purport. The conception of 4 castes and 4 orders of life, as planned by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 4.13, is to accelerate transcendental qualities of the individual person so that he may gradually realize his spiritual identity and thus act accordingly to get free from material bondage or conditional life. In almost all the Purāṇas, the subject matter is described in the same spirit. And so also in the Mahabharata, it is more elaborately described by Bhīṣmadeva in the Shanti Parva, beginning from the 60th chapter. The Varnashram Dharma is prescribed for the civilized human being just to train him to successfully terminate human life. Self-realization is distinguished from the life of the lower animals engaged in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Bhīṣmadeva advised for all human beings 9 qualifications. 1. Not to become angry. 2. Not to lie. 3. To equally distribute wealth. 4. To forgive. 5. To beget children only by one's legitimate wife. 6. To be pure in mind and hygienic in body. 7. Not to be inimical toward anyone. 8. To be simple. And 9. To support servants or subordinates. One cannot be called a civilized person without acquiring the above-mentioned preliminary qualities. Besides these, the Brahmanas, the intelligent men, the administrative men, the mercantile community, and the laborer class must acquire special qualities in terms of occupational duties mentioned in all the Vedic scriptures. For the intelligent men, controlling the senses is the most essential qualification. It is the basis of morality. Sex indulgence, even with a legitimate wife, must also be controlled. And thereby, family control will automatically follow. An intelligent man abuses his great qualifications if he does not follow the Vedic way of life. This means he must seriously make a study of the Vedic literatures, especially of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. For learning Vedic knowledge, one must approach a person who is 100% engaged in devotional service. He must not do things which are forbidden in the Shastras. A person cannot be a teacher if he drinks or smokes. In the modern system of education, the teacher's academic qualification is taken into consideration without evaluation of his moral life. Therefore, the result of education is misuse of high intelligence in so many ways. The Kshatriya, the member of the administrative class, is especially advised to give charity and not to accept charity in any circumstances. Modern administrators raise subscriptions for some political functions, but never give charity to the citizens in any state function. It is just the reverse in the injunctions of the Shastras. The administrative class must be well versed in the Shastras, but must not take to the profession of teachers. Their energy should be especially directed toward killing the thieves, the dacoits, the black marketeers, and all such undesirable elements of society. The administrators should never pretend to become nonviolent and thereby go to hell. When Arjuna wanted to become a nonviolent coward on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he was severely chastised by Lord Kṛṣṇa. The Lord degraded Arjuna at that time to the status of an uncivilized man for his avowed acceptance of the cult of nonviolence. The administrative class must be personally trained in military education. Cowards should not be elevated to the presidential throne by dint of numerical votes only. The monarchs were all chivalrous personalities, and therefore monarchy should be maintained provided the monarch is regularly trained in the occupational duties of a king. In fighting, the king or the president should never return home without being hurt by the enemy. The so-called king of today never visits the war field. He is very much expert in artificially encouraging the fighting strength in hope of false national prestige. As soon as the administrative class is turned into a gang of mercantile and laborer men, the whole machinery of government becomes polluted. No, this wasn't written yesterday. This was written in 1962 or 1960s. The Vaishyas, the members of the mercantile communities, are especially advised to protect the cows. Cow protection means increasing the milk productions, namely yogurt and butter. Agriculture and distribution of the foodstuff are the primary duties of the mercantile community, backed by education in Vedic knowledge and trained to give in charity. As the Kshatriyas were given charge of the protection of the citizens, Vaishyas were given charge of the protection of animals. Animals are never meant to be killed. Killing of animals is a symptom of barbarian society. For a human being, agricultural produce, fruits and milk are sufficient and compatible foodstuffs. The human society should give more attention to animal protection. The productive energy of the laborer is misused when he is occupied by industrial enterprises. Industry of various types cannot produce the essential needs of man, namely rice, wheat, grains, milk, fruits, and vegetables. The production of machines and machine tools increases the artificial living fashion of a class of vested interests and keeps thousands of men in starvation and unrest. This is not the standard of civilization. The Shudra class is less intelligent and should have no independence. They are meant for rendering sincere service to the three higher sections of the society. The Shudra class can attain all comforts of life simply by rendering service to the higher classes. It is especially enjoined that is, Shudras should never bank money. As soon as the Shudras accumulate wealth, it will be misused for sinful activities in wine, women, and gambling. Wine, women, and gambling indicate that the population is degraded to less than Shudra quality. The higher castes should always look after the maintenance of the Shudras, and they should provide them with old and used garments. A Shudra should not leave his master when the master is old and invalid, and the master should keep the servant satisfied in all respects. The Shudras must first of all be satisfied by sumptuous food and clothing before any sacrifice is performed. In this age, so many functions are held by spending millions, but the poor laborers are not sumptuously fed or given clothing, and so on, in charity. The laborers are thus dissatisfied, and so they make agitation. The Varnas are, so to speak, classifications of different occupations, and ashram dharma is gradual progress on the path of self-realization. Both are interrelated, and one is dependent on the other. The main purpose of ashram dharma is to awaken knowledge and detachment. The brahmacharya ashram is the training ground for the respective candidates. In this ashram, it is instructed that this material world is not actually the home of the living being. The conditioned souls under material bondage are prisoners of matter, and therefore self-realization is the ultimate aim of life. The whole system of Varnashram Dharma is a means to detachment. One who fails to assimilate the spirit of detachment is allowed to enter into family life with the same spirit of detachment. Let's read that again. One who fails to assimilate this spirit of detachment is allowed to enter into family life with the same spirit of detachment. Therefore, one who attains detachment may at once adopt the fourth order, namely, renounced, and live on charity only, not to accumulate wealth, but just to keep body and soul together for ultimate realization. Household life is for one who is attached, and the vanaprastha and sannyas orders of life are for those who are detached from material life. The brahmacharya ashram is especially meant for training both the attached and the detached. Now that was quite a purport. That explains everything Radharani and I were talking about just before we started to do this reading. 27, text 27. He, meaning Bhīṣmadeva, then explained by divisions, acts of charity, the pragmatic activities of the king, and activities for salvation. Then he described the duties of women and devotees, both briefly and extensively. Purport. By the way, there are 360 chapters of the Mahabharata are the instructions of Bhīṣmadeva to Yudhishthira on these subjects. 360. There's only 366 or 365 chapters in the whole Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. To give charity is one of the householder's main functions, and he should be prepared to give in charity at least 50% of his hard-earned money. A brahmachari or student should perform sacrifices. A householder should give charity, and a person in the renounced life or in the renounced order should practice penances and austerities. Those are the general functions of all the ashramas or orders of life on the path of self-realization. In the brahmachari life, the training is sufficiently imparted so that one may understand that the world as property belongs to the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. No one, therefore, can claim to be the proprietor of anything in the world. Therefore, in the life of a householder, which is a sort of license for sex enjoyment, one must give in charity for the service of the Lord. Everyone's energy is generated or borrowed from the reservoir of energy of the Lord. Therefore, the resultant actions of such energy must be given to the Lord in the shape of transcendental loving service for Him. As the rivers draw water from the sea through the clouds and again go down to the sea, similarly, our energy is borrowed from the Supreme Source, the Lord's energy, and it must return to the Lord. That is the perfection of our energy. The Lord, therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 9:27, says that whatever we do, whatever we undergo as penance, whatever we sacrifice, whatever we eat, or whatever we give in charity, must be offered to Him, the Lord. That is the way of utilizing our borrowed energy. When our energy is utilized in that way, our energy is purified from the contamination of material inebrieties. I'll read that again. When our energy is utilized in that way, our energy is purified from the contamination of material inebrieties. And thus we become fit for our original life of service to the Lord. Raja Dharma is a great science, unlike modern diplomacy for political supremacy. The kings were trained systematically to become munificent and not merely be tax collectors. Oh man, this is such good stuff. They were trained to perform different sacrifices only for the prosperity of the subjects. To lead the prajas to the attainment of salvation was a great duty of the king. The father, the spiritual master, and the king are not to become irresponsible in the matter of leading their subjects to the path of ultimate liberation from birth, death, diseases, and old age. When these primary duties are properly discharged, there is no need of government of the people by the people. In modern days, the people in general occupy the administration on the strength of manipulated votes, but they are never trained in the primary duties of the king. And that is also not possible for everyone. Under the circumstances, the untrained administrators play havoc in the name of making the subjects happy in all respects. On the other hand, these untrained administrators gradually become rogues and thieves and increase the taxation to finance a top-heavy administration that is useless for all purposes. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I'm biting my tongue not to make comments. Actually, the qualified brahmanas are meant to give direction to the kings for proper administration in terms of scriptures like the Manu Samhita and the Dharma Shastras of Parashara. A typical king is the ideal of the people in general. And if the king is pious, religious, chivalrous, and munificent, the citizens generally follow him. Such a king is not lazy and sensuous, living at the cost of the subjects, but is alert always to kill thieves and dacoits. The pious kings were not merciful to dacoits and thieves in the name of nonsensical ahimsa, nonviolence. The thieves and dacoits were punished in an exemplary way, so that in the future no one would dare commit such nuisances in an organized form. Such thieves and dacoits were never given possessions of administration as they are now. The taxation law was simple. There was no force, no encroachment. The king had a right to take 1/4 of the production made by the subject. In addition, the king had a right to claim 1/4 of whatever wealth the subject allotted for charity or spent for some other purpose. One would never grudge parting with it, because due to the pious king and religious harmony, there was enough natural wealth, namely grains, fruits, flowers, silk, cotton, milk, jewels, minerals, and so on. And therefore, no one was materially unhappy. The citizens were rich in agriculture and animal husbandry, and therefore they had enough grains, fruits, and milk without any artificial needs of soaps and toilets, cinemas and bars. The king had to see that the reserved energy of humanity was properly utilized. Human energy is meant not exactly for fulfilling animal propensities, but for self-realization. The whole government was specifically designed to fulfill this particular purpose. As such, the king had to select properly the cabinet ministers, but not on the strength of voting background. The ministers, the military commanders, and even the ordinary soldiers were all selected by personal qualification, and the king had to supervise them properly before they were appointed to their respective posts. The king was especially vigilant to see that the tapasvis, or persons who sacrificed everything for disseminating spiritual knowledge, were never disregarded. Oh my God. The king knew well that the Supreme Personality of Godhead never tolerates any insult to his unalloyed devotees. Such tapasvis were trusted leaders, even of the rogues and thieves, who would never disobey the orders of tapasvis. The king would give special protection to illiterates, the helpless, and widows of the state. Defense measures were arranged previous to any attack by the enemies. The taxing process was easy, and it was not meant for squandering, but was for strengthening the reserve fund. The soldiers were recruited from all parts of the world, and they were trained for specific duties. As far as salvation is concerned, one has to conquer the principles. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Pardon me. As far as salvation is concerned, one has to conquer the principles of lust, anger, unlawful desires, avarice, and bewilderment. To get freedom from anger, one should learn how to forgive. To be free from unlawful desires, one should not make plans. By spiritual culture, one is able to conquer sleep. By tolerance only, one can conquer desires and avarice. Disturbances from various diseases can be avoided by regulated diets. By self-control, one can be free from false hopes. And money can be saved by avoiding undesirable association. By practice of yoga, one can control hunger. And worldliness can be avoided by culturing the knowledge of impermanence. Oh my God. Dizziness can be conquered by rising up. and false arguments can be conquered by factual ascertainment. Talkativeness can be avoided by gravity and silence. And by prowess, one can avoid fearfulness. Perfect knowledge can be obtained by self-cultivation. One must be free from lust, avarice, anger, dreaming, and so on, to actually attain the path of salvation. As far as women are concerned, they are accepted as the power of inspiration for men. As such, women are more powerful than men. Mighty, why don't they quote this one? As far as women are concerned, they are accepted to be as the power of inspiration for men. As such, women are more powerful than men. Mighty Julius Caesar was controlled by a Cleopatra. Such powerful women are controlled by shyness. Therefore, shyness is important for women. Once this control valve is loosened, women can create havoc on society by adultery. Adultery means production of unwanted children, known as varna, sankara, who disturb the world. The last item taught by Bhīṣmadeva was the process of pleasing the Lord. We are all eternal servants of the Lord, and when we forget this essential part of our nature, we are put into material conditions of life. The simple process of pleasing the Lord, for householders especially, is to install the deity of the Lord at home. By concentrating on the deity, one may progressively go on with the daily routine work, worshipping the deity at home, serving the devotee, hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, residing in a holy place, and chanting the holy name of the Lord are all inexpensive items by which one can please the Lord. Thus the subject matter was explained by the grandfather to his grandchildren. Now you know why there's 360 chapters of Bhīṣmadeva's instructions to Yudhishthira. Text 28. Then he described the occupational duties of different orders and statuses of life, citing instances from history, for he was himself well acquainted with the truth. Purport. Incidents mentioned in such Vedic literatures as the Purāṇas, Mahabharata, and Ramayana are factual historical events that took place sometime in the past, although they were not related in any chronological order. Such historical facts, being instructive for ordinary men, were assorted without chronological reference. Besides that, they happened on different planets, nay, in different universes, and thus the description of the narrations is sometimes measured by three dimensions. We are simply concerned with the instructive lessons of such incidents, even though they are not in order by our limited range of understanding. Bhīṣmadeva described such narrations before Maharaj Yudhishthira in reply to his different questions. Text 29. While Bhīṣmadeva was describing occupational duties, the sun's course ran into the northern hemisphere. This period is desired by mystics who die at their will. Purport. The perfect yogis, or mystics, can leave the material body at their own sweet will, at a suitable time, and go to a suitable planet desired by them. In the Bhagavad Gita 8:24, it is said that self-realized souls who have exactly identified themselves with the interest of the Supreme Lord can generally leave the material body during the time of the fire god's effulgence and when the sun is in the northern horizon, and thus achieve the transcendental sky. In the Vedas, these times are considered auspicious for quitting the body, and they are taken advantage of by the expert mystics who have perfected the system. Perfection of yoga means attainment of a supramental state that enables one to leave the material body as desired and reach any planet within no time, without any of the material vehicles so much advertised by the less intelligent materialistic scientists. The yogis can reach the highest planetary system within a very short time, but this is impossible for the materialist whose attempt to reach the highest planet will fail, even if he travels for millions of years at a speed of millions of miles per hour. This is a different science, and Bhīṣmadeva knew well how to utilize it. He was just waiting for the suitable moment to quit his material body, and the golden opportunity arrived when he was instructing his noble grandsons, the Pandavas. He thus prepared himself to quit his body before the exalted Lord Sri Kṛṣṇa, the pious Pandavas, and the great sages, headed by Bhagavan Vyasa, and so on, all great souls. Hare Krishna. Tomorrow we will hear how Bhīṣmadeva passed away. Hare Krishna. We'll end our reading of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam tonight and beg the assembled sages to share with us their reflections and discussions on the topics that we just heard about, which were substantial. Hare Krishna. We started with text 26, and we only got to text 30. Quite some purport, don't you think? Okay, we're here with Radharaman Prabhu, our beneficiary, or benefactor rather, sorry, and Abhay, Das Brahmacharya. I think Radharaman might have a few things to say about that. Hare Krishna.
But I'll try to be non-controversial. But one thing that I was thinking of is about this point that we've discussed about reading and distributing books of Prabhupada like this. So at the moment in London we're doing a weekly reading of Sri Upanishad, and of course you're meanwhile doing the daily readings of Prabhupada's books, the first Canto of the Bhagavatam. And I couldn't help think about that idea that the German devotees once did of printing the extra 2 chapters of 1:1, so that you actually get in the section about the chapter about Bhīṣmadeva.
Yes.
But
excellent idea. Yeah.
And just on the point of reading the books that we distribute and introducing that culture to the new devotees, I mean, what a book this first canto is to read, and what a chapter this is to read in that connection.
It's amazing.
I mean, what Bhīṣmadeva teaches, and it was in the purport to 25, 26, where Prabhupada outlined those 9 points. And then there's this section of the purport, I hope I haven't lost it, which I wanted to ask a question about, because he said to get freedom from anger, one should learn how to forgive.
Hmm.
I just wonder, Maharaj, if you could comment a little more on that, please.
Well, of the different energies of the Lord that get things done in this world, the most powerful is the Brahmatejas, the energy of the Brahmins. And of those energies that the Brahmins have, forgiveness is the most powerful. Because when one has learned the art of forgiveness, then there's nothing that can happen to him that can disturb his mind to the point where he can't continue fixed in his devotional principles of life, and therefore be a beacon of happiness, actually, and knowledge, and eternal life, eternal instructions. Eternal life means eternal instructions. Hare Krishna. Anger is what is it? Lust, anger, and greed. These are the gates leading to hell. The hellish mentality, which is described in this 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the divine and demoniac natures. Yeah. So in this chapter, the beginning of the chapter describes in depth, at length, the divine qualities, and then analyzes the demoniac qualities. And at the end, Krishna says that you can avoid the demoniac qualities by making the shastric injunctions the standard of living. So the leadership of the world is mainly the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, or the saintly persons and the kings. And they're meant to be Rajrishis. The kings are meant to be Rajrishis, and the Brahmins are meant to be Rishis. And the Rishis and the Rajrishis, they disseminate the knowledge coming down from God, how to follow the laws of nature such that there is an atmosphere in the world that is conducive to becoming successful in the human form of life, which means to go back to Godhead. So in today's world, these things may seem to be primitive ways of looking at things. You know, how can being forgiving, how can that help in today's world where everybody's trying to cheat each other and exploit each other for their own personal or extended interests? Hare Krishna.
First is from Rati Manjari.
Hare Krishna, Rati.
She says, Jai Guru Maharaj.
Jai Rati. Haribo.
And from Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Jai Gopakanya Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, and all assembled sages, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada.
And from Sudevi Dasi.
Haribo Sudevi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Here with you, hearing this nectar, everything else disappears, even time. Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Thanks, Sudevi Dasi. Thank you very much. That's the idea, to get out of time.
From Vijay Krishna Das.
Yes, Vijay Krishna.
Why is it that milk is considered the most wonderful of foodstuffs? Please.
It is designed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's perfect food, and when it's taken in the proper amount, in the proper way, by contented cows, it fertilizes the brain, the tissues in the brain, and makes the brain tissues receptive and capable of understanding spiritual topics. Hare Krishna.
And from Bhakta Rupa?
Yes, Bhakta Rupa. Hari Bo.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for reading this evening. Recently I've personally been struggling to hear nicely from the Bhagavatam. I tune in each night but feel like I've lost the taste a little. I'm desperate to get that taste back because without it my mind drags me off to hell. I wondered what the causes for the loss of taste for hearing is and how to get it back. P.S. I still love hearing you speak and it remains the highlight of my day.
Well, it's not so difficult. Maybe it's too simple, and maybe the simplest solutions are sometimes not easy to see in this day and age of complexity. But the cause of our losing the taste for hearing about Kṛṣṇa is lust. Lust is created by the mode of passion, by associating with the mode of passion. And when mode of passion intensifies by prolonged or lingering thoughts of sense gratification, then it turns into lust. And that lust forces us to do things and say things that we know are not right, but we do it anyway. This was Arjun's question to Kṛṣṇa. What is it that makes us sometimes break principles or do things that are not good for us, even though we know, and we do it anyway? Kṛṣṇa also describes how meditating on sense objects causes us to, in the same verse I was describing before, same series of verses, once one is lustful and is pushed to do something that he knows is not good, not the right thing, then he becomes frustrated. The reason he becomes frustrated is because his senses are not satisfied. He's trying to satisfy his senses with sense gratification, but the soul cannot be satisfied by sense gratification because the soul is spiritual. The soul can only be satisfied by spiritual topics, by spiritual activities, by eternal topics, eternal activities, activities that go on in the spiritual world. That's what sadhana bhakti is about. So once one fails to satisfy the senses, which is not possible, then one becomes frustrated. And from frustration comes anger. Anger comes after frustration. And when one becomes angry, it becomes bewildered. And with that bewilderment becomes loss of memory. With loss of memory, one loses his intelligence. And then he can do anything and everything, and he does. And falls back into the material pool. So what can you do? to conquer that lust, tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajihiyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. Lust is the cause of destruction of jnana and vijnana, knowledge and self-realization. And the way we subdue it or tap it down, because everyone has in the material world contact with passion and modes of nature, how we tap it down is to regulate our senses. Rise at the same time, eat at the same time, the same amounts, hear every day at the same time, chant every day at the same time, take rest at the same time, regulate the senses. And if you do that, then you will become spiritually powerful and strong enough to conquer jnana vijnana nashanam, the destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Hare Krishna.
And from Subarao Rajagopal.
Yes, Subarao Rajagopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances and all glories to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Thank you for reading every day. My prayer today is that I should meditate on the 9 qualifications mentioned in the purport of verse 26 and follow in totality.
Yes.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Good New Year's resolutions. Right? We all have been happy. We all want to be happy. That's what the soul is. The soul is made of, the spiritual body is made of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, happiness. Therefore, everyone's looking for those 3 things. No one wants to die. One wants to know everything. And therefore, the material energy says, okay, here, have the internet. Now you think you find out, Siri, what's this? Oh, thank you. You can have knowledge at the tip of your fingers. And everyone wants to be happy all the time. That's who we are. But we're looking in the wrong place. That's it. So if we associate with the spiritual world, associate with spiritual persons, engage in spiritual activities, do our service for the purpose of helping others come to the spiritual platform, in other words, spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, we will become eternal, full of knowledge, and happy. Hare Krishna.
And this is more from Subrao.
Oh, Haribol Subrao. Ji.
He said, worldliness can be avoided by culturing the knowledge of impermanence. That's one of the highlights.
Yes, it is highlight. Because once you can remember that everything is temporary, then you won't spend all your time trying to get temporary things. Because you'll know that the temporary thing will have to be taken away from you. And the more attached you become to the temporary thing, the more you will suffer when it is taken away. And in case you don't notice, every one of us is going to leave this body. And at that time, everything gets taken away from you. Everything you own, everything you think, everything is gone. So better be Krishna conscious before that moment happens where we leave the body. Hare Krishna. That's the purpose of human life.
And, one more from Bhaktarupa.
Haribol Bhaktarupa.
He said, P.S. P.S. Tonight's purports were very, very tasty, particularly where solutions are offered for lust, anger, unlawful desires, and so on. Very eloquent solutions to so many obstacles on the path.
Well, there you go. You're answering your own question and you're doing the right thing to get your taste back. Hare Krishna. Tasty.
And from Gauranga Gopal.
Haribol Gauranga Gopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. What amazing purports. I was reflecting on the part of the purport from verse 27. Quote, the king was especially vigilant to see that the tapasvis, or persons who sacrificed everything for disseminating spiritual knowledge, were never disregarded. Unquote. We recently received £250,000 grant from the Welsh government, which must mean that they got a little purified by us distributing such knowledge, as well as sanctified food to the public.
Yes.
Obviously, if they actually read these books we distribute, they probably would shut us down, mainly after reading such heavy purports like these.
Maybe not. Maybe not. There are people who are reading these books, and they're not shutting us down. Hare Krishna. Don't worry. They'll never shut us down. At least for 10,000 years.
From Daitari Hari.
Hari, 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 Hari.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please
Hari.
accept my humble obeisances.
Jai Al Guru Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada. In the first purport, along with the next couple of purports, we've heard Prabhupada brilliantly describe many of the faults with society and a very insightful vision for how a Krishna-conscious society should be run and was run in times gone by. The values of people in society today are so backward and built up on so many false assumptions that the idea of implementing or significantly bringing in Daivi Varnashram even seems like a daunting task that will take many generations even within devotee communities. The early attempts of devotees to fully implement Varnashram decades ago weren't very well thought out, but it seems like Shivaram Swami's project with New Rajadam in Hungary is setting an outstanding example of devotees actually living in a society which demonstrates an example of what Prabhupada would have wanted. Do you feel this is the example the rest of the world should be aspiring to follow?
Yes, of course. He's putting the deities in the center. Everything that everyone does in New Brajadam is for the deities. Everything that's grown is first offered to the deities. You know. Anyway, I won't go into all the details. We don't have time now to go into all the details. We've run out of time. But yeah, I've lived there for years at a time while I was editing his books, and I have seen. But it's a fact that some people can't take it. They can't take how strict you have to be to live there. The householders live very simply there. But because the deities are so much in the center and they're so beautiful, and the kirtans are ecstatic, and the spiritual leadership is exemplary by example, therefore it works. So yes, I think we should all be aspiring to live to those principles. He chose Hungary for a certain reason, certain reasons. It may be a little easier there, you know. It's a little bit out of the way of the main, you know, thoroughfare of sense gratifiers, perhaps, and perhaps the people are a little bit more simple. They were under the communist rule, and then now they're not, so they're a little more austere and a little bit more submissive in general. And there's only 10 million of them in the whole country. So there's many, many factors that make that a good place to do what he's done. But it would not have been done unless he was so absorbed in Srila Prabhupada's books and in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.
And from Rati Manjari.
Yes, Rati.
Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. This is a fascinating chapter, so practical and universal, the teachings of Bhīṣmadeva. To think that he could teach all these things as he was lying on a bed of arrows is simply astonishing. And also I was marveling at the potency and insight of Srila Prabhupada, how he wrote these illuminating purports criticizing modern society in the early 60s, sitting in the courtyard of Sri Sri Radha Damodar Temple in Vrindavan. Simply wonderful.
Yes, absolutely wonderful. It's a wonderful point that you're making. And if you want to get the full brunt of how it's possible to do such a thing as Bhīṣmadeva did, just tune in to the 1977 October audio files from the archives and hear the room conversations, and then you will understand how a person who should not have been alive by medical analysis was still writing the purports to the 10th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
From Gauranga Gopal again.
Gauranga Gopal.
Also, I really appreciated the part of the same purport where Prabhupada was describing what we should do to get a particular result, like getting free from anger, unlawful desires, and so on. I wondered, what did he mean by the following, quote, by spiritual culture one is able to conquer sleep. Could you please elaborate on this one? Thank you.
You don't know what spiritual culture means? It means keeping yourself clean, keeping yourself neat, keeping your environment organized and clean and neat, eating simple foods, always don't put anything into your mouth that's not offered to the deity, keeping yourself active always in devotional service. This way you can conquer sleep. But don't think that you can imitate the 6 Goswamis and eat and sleep for 1 hour a day or less. Not possible. If you try to do that, you'll just get sick and you'll become crazy. Every person's need is different in terms of the amount of sleep he needs. In health, in sickness, we need more sometimes. In different stages of growth and maintenance of the body, we need more than other times. But the principle is, according to our capacity, we should keep it regulated and to a minimum. I know I just had 2 major surgeries this last year, and I've been forced for healing purposes to take a lot more extra rest than I normally do. But it's working. It's healing. And when I tried not to, it was getting worse. So do the needful so that your body becomes a vehicle to do the service that you've been asked to do by your spiritual master. Lord Chaitanya gave the 6 Goswamis and his intimate disciples and associates different duties. Some he gave the duty to do severe austerities and renunciation, others to write books, and others to chant the holy name constantly, like Haridas Thakur, and so on and so forth. So there's no template, there's no, it's not a cookie cutter approach. We don't become clones of another person. We stay ourselves, and we use whatever our talents and our abilities are in the service of Kṛṣṇa constantly. That's the Daivi Varnashram Dharma. It's already there. The Varnashram system is already there. They just aren't doing it properly. So we add doing what you're doing for Kṛṣṇa, and then you get the Daivi Varnashram system. It's already set up. There's intellectuals, there are military persons, and administrators and police. There's businessmen and agriculturalists. The system is ruining everything. There's workers. They all have the duties. It's similar. But the spiritual education and the spiritual principles are lacking. That's all that's lacking. And we have to inject those spiritual principles, and then the world will be revived, as it will, a long time from now. And that's it. It's 8:15, and we started at 7:05 or 7:07, and we can't go longer than this. It will take too long for him to download. I knew that this was going to happen. Remember when I stopped last night, I said this purport is a really long purport and it's really beautiful, so I left it for today, so we didn't try to do a rush job on it yesterday. Thank you all for your reflections. They're very nice, and please try your best to live by those principles, the ways of overcoming different anarthas and different unnecessary things. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Bhīṣmadeva ki jai, Maharaj Yudhishthira ki jai, Jai Shri Kṛṣṇa, Samabheda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow night. Same time, same place, same topic. We'll hear about Bhīṣma passing away tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.